So last week we unboxed and had a great time with this Klipsch Heresy 4 speakers. We cracked them open, looked at the inside, the outsides, hooked them up to a few different amplifiers like these little guys here. And it was a grand old time. And the video had a good reception, so I'm going to go ahead and take it a step further. As promised, we've got another pair of Klipsch here. We're going to go up in size to the next step up, which is the Klipsch Fortes. So I'm going to unbox them for you, and then go through the exact same process, and let's see where we land. All right, so the first order of business, we look at the unpacking instructions just like on the Heresies. So we're going to have to pull out the foam, flip them over, and it looks like it's a two-man lift. So let's do that. Well, as you can see, I did not follow my own directions. I did not pull the foam out of the bottom, so now this is going to be a bit more challenging. All right, here you have it. So this is the distressed oak finish. The gorgeous grill on it. This fabric is soft and vintage looking. Quite a nice presentation. Swing them around back. You can see the massive driver in the back. Same binding post that we saw on the other pair. And much skinnier in depth and taller than the Heresies, as you can imagine. This is for a narrower space. And we should get a little more bass out of this speaker as well. So let's go to the next step. Okay, not too bad of a lift. I was able to do it on my own. A much slender cabinet than the Heresies, but taller obviously. So this will fit a different style of room, different style of furniture. If you've got a narrower space, this is probably right, and a little bit of a bigger room. The finish you see here is distressed oak, which is gorgeous, with a light off beige fabric grill. Absolutely love this. Very vintagey and a great contrast and complement to the wood cabinet. On the back, it's finished like most in just black painted wood. The radiator in the back, the same connectors that we saw on the other set. So pretty striking. I'm looking forward to specifying this on some of our concierge systems where we put a whole system together for a client. Having these sort of 4 finishes available is going to help us just dial in the look for the room. In terms of placement, it's pretty straightforward. They're recommended about 2 to 10 inches from the back wall. I imagine that's because of the passive radiator. This will help kind of load the bass up a bit, which gives you a bit more bass from a room if you put it towards the corners or near the back wall. So I expect to get some nice punch out of these. Other than that, they're recommending 6 to 15 feet. This is a typical equilateral triangle, which we like to see in a seating position. And not much else in this manual to go over. Holding the grill in place, we see the same system except with an extra set of magnets because of the added height. So these are high strength magnets that attach to these screws here. And these rings that you see on the 4 corners are really just for transport. They're meant to be taken off once the speaker is settled into its listening position. I imagine so that's so the grill doesn't rub against the baffle of the speaker. Here we can see it's a 3-way system, slightly different horn than we saw at the other speaker. So next we're going to go on the bench and crack it open and have a look and see how this thing is made. Okay, I muscled the Fortes up onto our workbench and I put them on a little Lazy Susan. And here we can appreciate the finish a bit better in the light. Absolutely stunning. This is one thing I can't stress enough. The finishes on these, pretty much all the Klipsch Heresy line are astonishing, especially in person. The grain is just absolutely beautiful. And this particular distressed oak, the color is pretty unique. and works super well with the grill. The colors, there are 4 fundamental colors throughout the Heritage line, and then you can also get them on special finishes. So if you're ever interested in doing something custom, if you've got a very particular kind of finish that you want to match up in your room, do reach out to us. We can work with Klipsch in getting you something special ordered. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't take months and months and months. Klipsch is really, really good at delivering product, both stock and custom. So do reach out if you want something special. The other thing to note is that finishes do vary a bit from speaker to speaker. Now, when you buy a pair, they're always going to be beautifully matched. But what we've noticed over time is that depending on what the treat felt like doing, in particular the cherry can be a little bit different from finish to finish or from pair to pair. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. So here we can see the 3-way design with the Tetrix horn. Cool layout. And on the back, as noted earlier, we've got the all right, so I pulled a Torx wrench out from the drawer. This is a T25, and guys, if you use torque wrench, if you're not that familiar with the standard, you have to be super careful, much more careful than you do with Allen wrenches. While it is a superior format, what ends up happening is, for example, on this speaker, a 25 is the right fit, and it's a real nice snug fit. But the one below it, a 20, would also work, but it's not as good of a fit, and you do run the damage of run the risk of damaging the screw. So you always have to go one size up from what you think is the right fit. Now we'll move over to the passive radiator. Now the radiator uses regular screws, Phillips head. All right, so disassembled, complete. And as you can see, we can see right through the cabinet. All right, 4 drivers, really 3 are actually drivers. One is a passive radiator, the one in the back. So I've lined them up in the same fashion as I did last time, and I've also printed the spec sheets for the 3 models that are the entry level for the Heritage series. And on top of that, I've gone and pulled out the Heresy, so we can kind of get a sense for size and configuration. So pretty big difference. Obviously the Forte's up on a little pedestal or a little turnstile, so, but you get a sense of the height difference. There's quite a bit of difference in height and cabinet volume. But that's not where the big differences are. The horns are much different on the Heresy, and obviously the use of a passive radiator is a big change resulting in much better bass response. So let's go ahead and look through the complement of drivers. The first thing that strikes us is the woofer. We've got a 12-inch woofer. On the Heresy, they call it a K28E. On the Forte, they call it a K281. So I suspect that's probably the same exact woofer. On the mid-range, big difference. We've got a much different horn configuration, even though the compression driver is probably the same. So they're calling it a K702 1.75. Same thing on the Forte. So it's really the same compression driver, which is, or the engine, which is this guy right here, but a much different shape and size of horn. This is the Tetrix technology. This is really where the magic happens. Much better dispersion and imaging. And obviously the size makes a big difference too. And then on the tweeter, the spec sheet calls this tweeter on the Heresy a 107 Ti, and then on the Forte they call it a 100 Ti, yet on the back of it it says 107, so I suspect that's just a typo on the Forte spec sheet. I'll double check on that and get back to you guys. And then let's look at the passive radiator. Quite a beast. In size, this is 15 inches. Obviously, it's got no magnet structure, no motor assembly whatsoever, but it looks like pretty much the same basket that's probably used in a different speaker. So as you can imagine, this essentially transfers the low frequency vibrations into the open air from the cabinet. So it's not quite ported, it's not quite sealed, it's somewhere in between. Now what does that result in? Well, that results in a frequency response of 38 Hertz on the Forte versus on the Heresy. They're calling it to be, I'm not seeing it, 48 Hertz. So a good 10 Hertz difference, which is quite a bit of thump. Now in the Cornwall, if you go up a shot, it's the 34 Hertz. So not much of a difference between the Cornwall and the Forte in terms of bass response, but the Cornwall does a bunch of other things on its own, including a higher efficiency, higher SPLs, etc., etc. So there's really no substitute for size in speakers in the Heritage line. So I tell clients, well, we pick it based on two things. One is the size of the room, and two is the aesthetics. You know, sometimes, for example, these Cornwalls might look silly next to a tiny little credenza or a piece of furniture. Let's see if I can give you an example. Like that's a Cornwall next to a little piece. See if I can give you a better shot. So this is a typical vintage system that we do, and it would look really silly sitting next to a set of Cornwalls. So probably the Fortes or the Heresies would be a better match for that system. Taking a look at the cabinet, we see the same pretty much material gauges as we did on the Heresies, with the same type of foam and the same layout of the crossover, although this crossover seems to be a little bit more involved and upsized in every bit. I did notice the securing posts for the drivers, the active drivers, are threaded inserts, while for the passive radiators, just a wood screw into the MDF. Expected again a little bit of a cost savings, a little disappointing. Same for the back of the speaker plate. I would have liked to seen that be threaded, but these are just tiny little things. They're not indicative or resulting in any performance difference, but at a certain price level you expect a certain level of craftsmanship. I did not look at the woofer or show you the back. Quite a heavy affair. Look at the size of that magnet, absolutely insane. It is a stamp basket in the traditional sort of vintage speaker making style, and it is vented, as you can see over here. All right, going back to the cabinet, I keep jumping all over the place. Here's a good shot of the crossover for you. Now in the last video, a bunch of you complained about the quality of the components used on the crossover. I get it. As I said, with the binding posts or with the threaded inserts, you expect a certain level of quality. These are not very high quality PC boards. The components seem to be pretty good, even though some of you had specific complaints about it at this price range, and I get it. But they do have the nice upgraded binding posts, these aluminum affairs with the jumpers. Super nice and a good upgrade over the previous version. Here's a wide shot of the back. All right, so let me sum up the differences. Obviously, cabinet size, same woofer, same tweeter, we suspect, same driver in the mid-range with a different style horn. And the Heresy is a ported design, meaning if we go to the back, we will see the port for the bass to escape, while on the Forte, we will see the passive radiator. Now, when you jump up into the Cornwalls, same mid-range as the Forte, same tweet as the Forte, but we go up a size quite a bit on the woofers. We go to 15-inch drivers, and we go back to a ported design, hence the 34 hertz of bass response. All right, so that wraps up for this section. Now I'm going to assemble this thing back up, and I'm going to take it over to a listening bay and get some amplifiers cooking. Now looking at the bottom, check this out. One of my concerns from the Heresy was the way the feet were mounted. Out of the tabs that secure these metal sliders into the wood, only 2 or 3 were making contact. But in this one, they've got these cool little corner blocking pieces that actually land the entire section of the slider. So this should stay on a lot better in place. Still disappointing they didn't have some sort of threaded insert, but I get it. This is a vintage speaker, and this is the way things are done. So a little bit better, but not perfect. Okay, so I've moved the Fortes onto bay 1. This is a neo-vintage bay that we've got set up here at SkyFi. We're featuring this great Pioneer system that we assembled from a collector. Really great pieces, 1980s, actually 1990s mostly, but real minty stuff. Usually this Pioneer Elite stuff is beat up, but we've got a really cool set here. It's composed of a bunch of pieces, a pair of amplifiers, the M91s. So you can see them here. Their top-of-the-line CD player, which is the PD93, absolute gorgeous piece. I did a video on this one entirely, so see if you can catch that. Taking a look on the inside is really an experience. F93 tuner, another great piece. This is the top for them. And then the C90 and C91 preamps, slightly different on what they do video-wise, but as you can see, it's a full system, really cool. Now having two 91s gives us the ability to run biamp, which is pretty cool. All these Klipsch speakers have 2 sets of binding posts, so we can actually run an amplifier for the woofers and then another amplifier for the mids and highs. We haven't done that here. We're just running a single amp right now, but that'll be one of the tests that we do. So we're gonna listen a bit on the solid state. Not quite sure, maybe 100 and some watts. I'll find out on the next clip. And then we're gonna switch over to these beauties. These are McIntosh MC75s, anniversary edition, hence the gold finish. This was a 2009 reissue of a classic 75 in a special finish. So we'll see what 75 watts do with these Fortes, which I suspect is going to be the sweet spot. All right, Elliot was nice enough to look up. These are 200 watts per side into 8 ohms, each of the amplifiers. Now listen, we're at the limit of what the Forte specification is, but it's a bunch of nonsense. You can use any amplifier of wattage. You could use 1,000,000 watts if you want. It's just a matter of how high you turn it up. On the low side, there are some down effects. If you have a solid state amp that doesn't have enough power and you stress and distort the signal, you can damage the speaker. But we've successfully run these Heritage series speakers with as little as 4 watts, which is what we've got here. If you saw the earlier video, we did these Telefunkens are about 4 watts, and they did a beautiful job running the Heresies. So 200 watts per channel, single amplifier. Let's see what we've got here. Now I've got a bunch of hours already on these speakers, so I'm pretty familiar at this point. The bass is remarkably more than the Heresies, as can be expected. I find less differences in terms of mids and highs. A lot has to do with positioning, and a lot has to do with you know, how much you tone in, you do get quite a bit of difference in imaging and soundstage. I've got a few degrees of tone in right now, which is what I like. I'm sitting pretty close to the speaker. I cannot be more than 7 or so feet away from it. These do really well close up as well as at a distance, and I'm always amazed at that. And by toning them in, you can completely change the character of the mids and the highs. So this is one of those speakers that kind of requires you to sit and just try a few degrees at a time and figure out what is the right amount for you. Now, to get even more bass, I could put this back against the wall. The further you go into a corner or a wall, with especially with a rear firing speaker like this one, the more amplification we're going to get on those bass frequencies. So right now they're a little bit forward because if I push them back, they'd be in the way of all the other furniture. But ideally, these would be closer to the wall to maximize how much bass you get out of them. I'm a bass junkie, so there's not such thing as too much bass. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and hook up those Mac amplifiers. Okay, I've gone ahead and hooked up the MC75s. Before we talk about or discuss the impressions I get from these, the Fortes are available on our website if you are interested in a pair. They are around $5,000, I believe, and they come in 4 different finishes. And that's going to be in black, which is a black ash. It's essentially like a dark black stain on a wood finish with a salt and pepper grill. Above that, you've got the natural cherry, also with the salt and pepper grill cloth. And then natural cherry is the one that can vary a little bit from speaker to speaker. American walnut, my absolute favorite finish. That's what you see over there in Las Scalas. And lastly, distress oak, which is what these are. Now, the distressed oak is the only pair that comes in this lamb's wool grill, but we've got a way of actually ordering different grills for different finishes. So do reach out to us if you want a special material on there, as well as a special finish. So skyfiaudio.com, just go to speakers, Klipsch, and you'll be able to see these along with all the other ones. All right, so I've got the 75s hooked up. Now the power rating on these is 100 to 400 watts. And that's what they're calling continuous and peak. So they're asking for 100 watts continuous. We don't need anywhere near that amount. I guarantee you, all we need is like 15 watts to get these absolutely singing. So 75 should be a really, really nice spot for them. So these are mono blocks, as I mentioned. Yes, you should not have them on top of speakers. I did it out of convenience, also so that you can see them on the video. You know, you could argue that the vibrations from the cabinets is going to transfer through the tubes and cause a microphonic response. So yeah, not ideal, but certainly super cool. All right, let's have a listen. So right off the bat, notice a bit more definition of the bass and a bit warmer, a little tubier sounding response from it. Definitely the sweet spot is going to be a 2-bass 75 watter, but you could get away with as little as 2, maybe 25 watts. For example, the MC225 would be also a wonderful amplifier. I think we've got one cooking around somewhere. Also an MC240 would be neat. Let me show you, for example, And over here, yes, that is a 911 from the 80s. I'll show you that a little bit later. Here's an MC225, beautiful piece that is really their best amplifier, best vintage amplifier. And if you can't find one of those, which are a bit hard to find, the MC240 would be a great match. I bet we've got one sitting in this stack here of refurbished amplifiers. All right, I think that wraps it up for this particular one. Next will be the Cornwalls. They're sitting right here in a box. We're going to go ahead and crack them open and show them, and we'll do a three-way comparison. We'll do the Heresies, the Fortes, and the Cornwalls all together. And then when we're done with those three pairs, I'm going to do a video on the La Scalas, which I'll tell you a secret, they're my absolute favorite speakers so far. Really, really enjoying them as well. But I realize that it's not for everyone and it's not for every room. So if you want to discuss what the right speaker is for you, give me a call. SkyFiaudio.com is our website. You'll get our number there. Ask for Fernando. Happy to chat Klipsch with you day in and day out. And please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the videos. It'll keep us motivated. And you'll see all this crazy stuff that we've got here in the shop. Thanks for watching. Now, if you're into cars, we've got a 911 here that's a client. It's a Carrera Targa from the mid-80s. Absolute cool car. I'm going to dive deep into it this weekend, figure out what's good about it, what's bad about it, and this will be on our website. If you don't know it, there are some cars for sale. We're into it as much as we're at Hi-Fi, so check it out on their automobiles. There's at least half a dozen cool vintage cars. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Please leave comments below if I've screwed anything up. I'm sure I have. I do in every video, but I love to hear it. No feelings hurt. So thanks for watching.